Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about the final piece of the marketing plan, which is the campaign evaluation and monitoring piece. So up until this point in the class, we've talked about the marketing strategy section. We talked a lot about the implementation section. But before we can put the plan to bed and really start implementing this plan as a whole, we need to focus on the evaluation and monitoring section. And like we've talked about a few times in class and over the documents that you've read in the marketing plan assignment, we need to build our metrics into the plan during the planning process. We don't want to get into a situation where the plan is already up and running, the media is already in market, or the ads are already online, and we're not sure how we're going to measure the effectiveness of any of these pieces. So as we are making our recommendations and we're thinking about what we need to include in the plan, I want to also challenge you to think in a way that I refer to as the measurement mindset. In the measurement mindset, I want you to think about these questions and really tie them back to something that we talked about the very first week of the semester, which was the ADA model. So for each thing that you put into your marketing plan, specifically as it relates to the implementation section of your plan, because that's where your media and your promotion and your communication strategies are going to come into play, I want you to think about these three things. How or what part of the ADA model does that specific communication, promotional, target audience piece, how does that relate back to the ADA model or the funnel? Is it more about awareness or is it more about action or any of the other two in between? The second thing that I want you to think about is how can it be measured or tracked? We want to make sure that we can evaluate as much of the individual components of the plan as possible. So we want to make sure that we build the plan with the metrics from the ground up. And then the last thing that I want you to think about is, can it be refined? Is it flexible enough that if there's an area for optimization or an opportunity for refinement, that we have a little bit of flexibility or wiggle room with that particular component so that we can make changes. Because if we have this measurement mindset and we really build these metrics into our plan from the beginning, from the ground up, not only are we going to be running through this marketing plan and implementing all of the different stages and getting the changes that we're hopefully getting the changes that we're looking for, we're going to be learning and evaluating the success and the effectiveness of these things as we go, so that we might find that one piece of the plan works better than another piece of the plan. And so we will have the opportunity, if these tools are built with some flexibility, to be able to maybe divest or reduce our investment in less effective areas of the plan, and then divert or reinvest those dollars into the more effective piece of the plan. And we're going to talk about different types of measurements that we can think about including in just a minute. But before we do that, I just want to give you a quick refresher on the ADA model. So ADA model has the four components: awareness, interest, desire, and action. And just like I mentioned a few moments ago, and like we mentioned the first week of class, when we're putting together marketing plans, each piece of the implementation stage should address at least one of these four things and be tied to one of these four types of objectives, if you will. If we have a branding campaign and we're really trying to drive awareness and interest, if we have a really short-term tactical plan, we might focus directly on action and filling that shopping cart. So we need to know what the components of the plan are, and then what piece of this model those components are aimed at addressing. By doing that, then we can start to put some metrics in place based on what it is that we are trying to accomplish. So the rest of this PowerPoint that I'm going to walk you through gives you some common metrics that you can build into your marketing plan for each of these different areas. And sometimes you can shift them around a little bit. The same measurement could be used for interest or could be used for desire. But on the whole, I believe that this provides a very good framework in terms of different types of metrics that you can use aimed at the objectives of each of the different components that are tied back to the ADA model. So let's start with the first piece, which is awareness. These are some of the most common awareness metrics that we can look at. The first one being top of mind awareness, which means we ask consumers, please list all the brands you can think of in a particular category or space. And the very first brand that gets listed is the one that came to their mind first. That's why it's number one. And that's what we refer to as top of mind awareness. Total awareness would be every brand that they wrote on that list. There's also opportunities under total awareness where it could be a closed-ended question where we give a list of all the brands in our competitive space and have them check all the brands that they may have heard of before. But top of mind awareness specifically is what brand did they think of first. And then the third one here is this idea of brand recall or advertising awareness, where we could ask them to describe ads that they may have seen, or we'll show them a series of ads and see if they remember seeing one of the ads, which would be ours, and the other one would kind of be filler ads. So a couple different ways to get to each of these measurements, but these are the main awareness measures when we're talking about awareness and brand health. Something else that I want to bring to your attention before we move on to the second piece of the ADA model is to take a moment and talk a little bit more about how you could, as a marketing manager, track your brand's image or your brand's health over time. So a lot of companies will set up something referred to as a brand tracking study. And they'll usually run the study on a regular basis, could be weekly, quarterly, biannually, or even as little as once a year, depending on what makes sense for the business. And they'll ask a series of questions, a lot of which I've listed here. So there's awareness measures in here, there's perception measures in here, there's the understanding and the consumer's understanding of the brand. What do they think the brand stands for? How do they think the brand is different from the competition? These are really great questions to measure, not just among your current brand, but also your top competitors, to see where you stand. Is your awareness higher or lower than the competition? Do they get your core brand tenets or your core points of differentiation confused with the competitor, or can they correctly describe your brand? Right? And then we also want to look at their likelihood to purchase our product or service. Imagine if we had this information on a regular basis for your company as well as for your top competitors. Having a brand tracker tool is extremely important. It helps in terms of tracking the successfulness of the messaging and the different marketing and promotional efforts that you have out there in terms of monitoring increases or decreases in awareness. And hopefully you would like to see things like, if you put some communications in market within a couple weeks, you would hope to see a lift in awareness and a lift in some of these core messaging points that are listed here. But it can also help you from a competitive perspective in terms of, are you remaining flat while your competition is increasing? Or are you able to head off the competition and the competition is flat and you start increasing? So a brand tracker tool is a very, very effective tool. You can set up very, very simple ones using Qualtrics or other tools that we're going to be teaching you throughout this program, or you can partner with an external marketing research firm and really blow this project out. But if you set up a tracker, at a minimum, you'll have the awareness pieces covered from the ADA model, and any of your tools that were, any of the strategies that you're putting in place that were aimed at moving the awareness needle, you'd get that covered off on in a brand tracker study. So if you are interested in setting up a brand tracker on your own, you could either use the tools that you're going to be learning in this program and setting up, you know, a simple to moderate version yourself, or there are several marketing research firms that offer brand tracking study services out there that run the gamut of pricing depending on your needs and the budget. You want to make sure that whether you're working with the firm or you're doing it on your own, that, like I mentioned, you do it for tracking your own brand and at least, you know, a few, 3 to 4 of your top competitors. It's also great if you have room in the budget, or if you have accessibility, to not only survey your existing customers, but potential customers or competitive customers that also fall inside your target audience. So these are people that you would be hoping to convert to brand users or customers in the future. Getting their perspective, awareness, and understanding of your brand and what your brand stands for can be extremely valuable. Making sure that you're running it on a regular basis, that's why we're calling it a tracker. And then make sure you're sharing the results regularly. We don't want to sit on top of the results. And we can use a lot of this information to feed back into the evaluation piece in terms of, if we did a very, very heavy radio buy, for example, and a radio run, but we did not see any movement in awareness, we could look back at the brand tracker data and say, maybe radio is not the most effective media for this audience, and maybe we should reinvest that money and maybe outdoor or online or whatever seems to be resonating more with our target audience. So the tracker and running it on a regular basis and sharing the results regularly is a key component to that ongoing evaluation I was mentioning. Let's move on and talk about the second piece of the ADA model when we're thinking about interest. And there's so many things that we can look at under the interest funnel, so under the interest piece. So these are just a couple. Obviously, with the advent of online behavior and online search, when customers are in that more information gathering stage and they're just trying to learn about their choices or to just evaluate whether or not this particular product or service might be a good idea, they're going to be going online first. So there's going to be a lot of search metrics that you can look at. So anything in terms of your SEO, search engine optimization, or your PPC, which is your pay-per-click, right? Anything like that you can take a look at. Search terms, search position, how to maximize all of that is going to be extremely helpful for you so that you're competing in the right space. Also, looking at the types of words that people are searching for can be very beneficial for you in terms of knowing which terms you want to bid on in the future. Those are just some examples. We can also look specifically at the website traffic and engagement. Are we seeing an increase in the number of visitors to the site, or an increase in the number of unique visitors, new people that are coming back to the site instead of the same person coming in over and over again? If we're trying to drive them to a specific product or a specific page, looking at the clickstream analysis could be extremely important. Are they going right to the certain advertised product or service, or once they hit the home page, what's the first page they go to after that, and the page after that? Trying to understand the consumer navigation piece, and if there's a way that we can make that easier or simpler to get them to the next phase, kind of driving them through the funnel and down into desire. We can also look at heat mapping exercises or eye tracking tools where we're trying to figure out where consumers are spending the most time on our website and the things that they're engaging with the most. What is their eye attracted to? How long are they looking at that particular piece of the web page? Or how much traffic and interaction is a particular section of that web page getting within the overall site? And again, is that the objective? Is that what we drove them to? Or are they getting lost somewhere in the navigation? And there might be an opportunity to simplify. And then, of course, all the things that you've been learning with Google AdWords, Google Fundamentals, and Google Analytics as you're going to continue to go through this program are all things that you can continue to layer on under site traffic and engagement. And then lastly, of course, we can't forget those physical stores, the brick and mortar stores. So are we seeing an increase in foot traffic to the physical locations? Things like this that we can easily count before and after and try to take measurements on and see if we're seeing the lifts that we were hoping for as we move through the plan for the particular pieces of the plan that were specifically aimed at driving interest. The third piece in the AIDA model, as you remember, is the desire piece. This is when we go from, I think it's interesting, to, I think I want this. And they're going to become even more involved or even more engaged with the brand. And this is where they're going to really start to raise their hand and say, yes, I want more information about this. Yes, tell me more, because I think that I want this. So there's a lot of different things that we can look at here. From a sales perspective and online perspective, we can look at lead generation and lead conversion rates. We can look at email behavior and permissions. Are they starting to open the emails? Are they clicking in the emails through to the website? Are they giving us permission to market to them and send emails to them in the future, whether it's email opt-in, opting in for other promotional messages, opting in for newsletters or blog posts, things of that nature. Again, continuing to raise our hand. From a social perspective, are they starting to share the content? Are they liking stuff? Are they reposting it? Are they starting to help us spread the word and have others kind of get on board in terms of desire, just as they are? Are they subscribing? And this is kind of tied to the promotion things I just looked at. Are they reading the newsletters? All of the same type of metrics in terms of opens, clicks, click streams, heat mapping, eye tracking, things like that we were talking about on the site, website traffic. We can do very similar things when we're looking at newsletters and blogs. So lots of opportunities for measurement here. Are we seeing increases in calls to the call center? More people calling in to get more information or to give their credit card, that type of thing. The last two are also extremely important when it comes to desire, which is, are we now in the brand consideration set? So we've gone from the broader piece of we were aware of the brand, but we're also aware of several of our competitors' brands. Then we start evaluating them and we start thinking, this particular brand might be interesting, and some brands will probably fall off the list, and we'll be left with a smaller core brand consideration set where it's only our brand and maybe a couple others. Because as they learn more about the different brands and about our brands, they'll realize during the evaluation process that not all of them are going to meet their criteria or meet their criteria effectively. So do we make it into the consideration set? And then of all the brands that they are considering, how likely are they going to be to purchase our brand's products or services? And also, how likely would they be to purchase our competition's products or services? If they're just as likely to purchase both, that lets us know that we're still neck and neck with the competition, and we need to do something else to push these fence sitters over to our side of the fence, to our brand. If they're much more likely to purchase our brand than the competition at this point, then we know that we're getting them that much closer down the funnel and into the action piece. Couple more desire things that I want to mention before we do that, though. The first is really tied with word of mouth, right? That's kind of, and there's a couple pieces underneath word of mouth that we can look at. So the first one has to do with ratings and review website. And it's, again, tied to this idea of engagement. Are they joining the online conversation? And even if they're not actually writing anything yet, are they reading them? Which ones are they reading from which sites? How influential are these ratings and reviews to the purchase decision? So we could ask them questions about where were they looking for information about these products or services during the search. If we know what they're looking at and how influential those things are, that's really important for managing our word of mouth strategy. And then speaking of word of mouth, there's a really good tool that a lot of companies use to kind of gauge how strong their potential word of mouth can be for their particular brand. And that's this idea of a Net Promoter Score. In a Net Promoter Score, also known as NPS, we ask our target audience how likely are they to recommend the brand on a scale from 1 to 10. Anyone who rates the brand between a 0 and a 6, and those are the red people in this visual here, they're referred to as detractors. They have a negative impact on the word of mouth. Anyone who rates a 7 or 8, the orange people in the middle, are referred to more of our kind of passively satisfied. So that we can kind of make the leap that they are at least somewhat satisfied with our product or service, but they're not going to actively go out and spread the gospel. They're not going to be those brand advocates or brand evangelists that we talked about in the Brand Equity Week. People who said on a scale of 1 to 10 that they were going to likelihood to recommend the brand is a 9 or a 10. The green people all the way on the right, those are our promoters. Those are our evangelists. We want as many of them as possible, right? So what we would do to calculate our Net Promoter Score is out of the total number of people who took the survey, we're going to count up the number of promoters, the people who rated a 9 or 10, and get the percentage of the total. So everyone who rated a 9 or 10 divided by the number of people that answered the question. And we're going to subtract that from the percentage of detractors. So the total number of people who rated a 0 through 6 divided by the total number of people in the survey. Notice we don't do anything with the passives. And that's really because they don't do anything for us. Typically, you'll see Net Promoter Scores of around 30% for a company that's doing well. But if we really want to move the needle, we really want to increase engagement, leverage that word of mouth, there are some companies like Amazon, for example, where their Net Promoter Score will fluctuate somewhere between a 50 and a 60%. It's not likely that we're going to get something in the 80, 90s, or close to 100% range because we're always going to have people that are dissatisfied. But the greater our Net Promoter Score, that's a good gauge in terms of positive energy that's out there in the marketplace, people willing to talk positively about our products and services, which we know has a much larger effect nowadays than advertising when it comes to brand consideration and brand purchase. So putting in a Net Promoter Score calculation and question into any of your tracking studies is a great tool to kind of see where your company's at, in addition to monitoring those ratings and reviews and asking some other questions about them. The last piece of the funnel has to do with action. So do they actually make the purchase? And there's so much information that we can collect. So of course, we can look at what they purchase, how much they purchase, where are they purchasing it. We can collect a lot of information. Are they buying online or in the store? Are they buying one product at a time, multiple products at a time? Or one service versus service packages? There's so much information that we can collect and then mine, and that kind of ties back to the big data and discussion that we had a few weeks ago in terms of looking for consumer trends and patterns, and not only use this information to evaluate the effectiveness of any of the marketing plan that was geared and aimed specifically at driving the action, but also we can start to learn more about our customers. Is this type of customer more likely to buy this type of product, right? Continuing to learn as we go is another great benefit for having all of these types of measurements built into our plan from the beginning. And here's something interesting when we think about tracking purchases and behavior that I want to share with you. I'm sure you've all seen these barcodes that are on the bottoms and sides of consumer packaged products. things you buy in the grocery store, at Target, Walmart, drugstores, that type of thing. All of these codes and numbers have a specific piece of information that then gets passed back to the brand and to the parent company. So you'll see something, usually the UPC code, which is the universal barcode, and that's the external tracking system, usually put on there by the parent company and by the brand. You might also see, in addition to that, an SKU, known as a stocking keeping unit, and that's put on at the individual store level and usually used for inventory purposes. Both of these tools, or either, are great for answering some of the questions and helping us build tracking behavior patterns for our consumers. So what's selling the most and at what price point? Where are they being sold? The time of day that they're being sold. Every time you run something through that grocery store checkout line and you hear the bing, 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 and it's reading that UPC code, all that information is being collected and organized in different rows and columns in a database somewhere that is going to get passed back to the store, to the brand, and to the parent company, where they can connect this information to you, particularly if you have a loyalty card. And we're going to talk about loyalty cards and loyalty card data in our final lecture next week. But there's so much information that we can use and so much kind of bigger picture analysis that we would be able to complete if we are looking at product purchase tracking. Now, if you're working in a smaller environment or a smaller retail store and you might not have a UPC because it's not from a bigger brand, or your company doesn't have SKUs yet, there are other ways that you can build very simple database systems in terms of tracking what was sold, how much it was sold for, when it was sold, and to whom. And then the last piece that I want to talk about today, which I've been talking about throughout the program, is the optimization and refinement piece. So now that we've talked about different types of measurements that you can put into place for each of the different sections of the ADA model, I also want you to think about other metrics that we can put in and keep track of so that we can look from an optimization and refinement perspective. The first one is, how much should we spend? And we look at how much should we spend in total, the whole marketing budget, if you will, and then how much should we spend within a particular category of the budget? How much did we spend on traditional media like TV and radio broadcast? How much did we spend in digital? How much did we spend in outdoor or promotions? So by category, so total marketing spend, then category spend, and then we can even look at how much did we spend within that particular category. How much TV versus radio versus digital display ads. And we can start looking at the different percentages or proportions within spend and see if that makes sense. We can look at things like reach and frequency. Were we getting what we said we were going to get from the media plan, or do we need to look at make goods? We can look at impressions. How many people do we know saw our advertisements, both from a broadcast perspective as well as online? And once we start to know some of that information, then we can put together some ROI matrix. Now, we've been talking the whole semester about other ways that we can evaluate the investment and whether or not it's a good investment, right? And we'd spent a lot of time looking at contribution margin, and we looked at how to calculate break even. So it's just kind of another spin on these, just trying to giving you something else in the toolbox. And we can calculate these, again, for the whole campaign. We can calculate it for an individual category or for an individual element within that category. It just depends on what makes the most sense for you and your business. When we look at ROI, it's a simple It's a simple piece. What did I get minus how much I paid for it, divided by how much I paid for it. So if I know, for example, how many impressions I got off of a certain campaign, I could take the number of impressions minus how much I paid for it, divided by how much I paid for it, and I figure out my ROI in terms of every impression cost me X amount. And do I feel good about that? And does that make sense? Is that in line with other pieces of ROI that I have in the rest of my plan? Or do I seem to be over or underspending in certain areas? Do certain areas of my plan give me more ROI and other areas of my plans give me less? This is what I mean when I think about we're always measuring and we're always refining. And that's the whole point of the visual that you're seeing in the top right. We're constantly gauging and measuring, moving things around, evaluating and refining, or learning and optimizing, however you want to say. So it's always an iterative process, but the more data-driven information we build into the plan, the more flexibility that we're going to have in order to make changes and make the plan better as the plan moves along. Not waiting till the end when the 1-year plan is over and we go, oh man, if we just want to move some money around in month 7 or 8, we could have got X number more impressions. No, move that money around now. Why wait? Otherwise, we're leaving things on the table where we could have gotten more awareness if we just would have moved some dollars. Why wait? Do it now. And that kind of leads me to the last piece, which is this idea of a threshold management strategy. I know that sounds really fancy, but all it's saying is you can put some thresholds in place, kind of loose, if a particular part of the plan is supposed to drive awareness by X%. For example, let's just say we're thinking we're going to see a 10% lift in awareness versus prior year. And we don't get to that. We only see a 5%. And it's not moving. We look 1 quarter, 2 quarters, maybe even 3 quarters, and nothing's changing. Instead of waiting for the 4th quarter, where again, it's most likely going to be the same, that's when you would make a change. We would say this particular campaign element is not meeting the threshold that we're expecting. Instead of waiting and hoping for the best, we're going to reinvest that in a better performing area and see how it goes from there, because you're already not meeting the expectation that you thought. So taking a small risk and moving the money over could have a much bigger reward. So you can set some basic thresholds for some of your bigger areas. And because you'll be tracking and monitoring these throughout the year, if you see over time that an area is underperforming, it's not meeting this basic threshold, you can have the conversation about potentially moving things over. So I know I covered a lot of stuff today, and there's more on here. These are not the end-all, be-all in terms of measurements, but there's so many things that are out there, so many more things we're going to introduce you to throughout the program. But just wanted to show you that these are some of the common things that we would put into the marketing plan measurement and tied specifically to the marketing plans that we're putting together. Hopefully this is also going to be useful for you as you're working on the final section of your digital marketing plans and kind of giving you some inspiration on things that you could think about that you would want to track in terms of the success of the websites that you're going to be building.